She wasn't supposed to survive Black Ridge. 7 men trapped in a frozen pass, wind tearing metal apart, systems failing one by one. They said no pilot could make it out alive. But Lieutenant Colonel Rowan Hale did. Now she's back at Fort Novacel, where arrogance calls an Apache a toy, and 7 soldiers are trapped again. This time, she'll fly through another storm to prove one truth. Limits only exist for those who've never been tested at 11,000 feet. Before we begin, tell us, where are you watching from? And if you believe honor and courage still matter, help keep their legacy alive. The hangar buzzed before dawn. Harsh fluorescent light flickered across steel panels, cutting through the cold air of Fort Novacel. Rotor blades waited motionless, dark silhouettes beneath the ceiling cranes. Colonel Pierce Wainwright stood with a coffee in one hand and sarcasm in the other. "Careful, sweetheart," he said loud enough for every officer to hear. "That Apache isn't a toy." Laughter rippled from the flight crew, short, nervous, male. Lieutenant Colonel Rowan Hale didn't flinch. She walked straight past them, helmet under her arm, boots echoing across concrete. Every motion was deliberate, measured like someone who didn't need to prove a thing. At the far end, Captain Noah Mercer waited beside the twin-engine monster of matte black steel. "You're really doing this?" he asked quietly. Rowan's only reply was a nod as she climbed the ladder into the cockpit. Switches clicked, systems hummed alive. Warning lights rolled across her visor. Beneath the laughter still lingering in the hangar, the low growl of the turbine started to build steady, confident, inevitable. On the ground, Lieutenant Nyla Brooks, the youngest pilot on base, stared upward, eyes wide behind her headset. She'd seen the colonel's smirk. She also saw something different in Rowan's calm silence. Outside the hangar, cold Alabama air filled with the heavy thud of blades testing torque. Sunlight broke over the horizon, catching the Apache's nose art, EVRG 01. A designation most people didn't recognize yet. Rowan adjusted her gloves, voice low through the intercom. "Pre-flight complete. Engine 1 stable. Engine 2 ready." Noah scanned his panel. "All green. Command tower cleared you for standard maneuver demonstration only." Her tone stayed level. "Copy," but she flicked one final switch under the throttle guard, a toggle no one on the ground could see. Wainwright turned toward the visiting Pentagon officers. "We're starting with basic patterns, nothing risky today." His smile said, "See, I'm in control." The Apache lifted, hovering a few feet above the deck. Dust spun around it like smoke. The vibration rolled through everyone's boots. Then the helicopter climbed slow, deliberate, textbook perfect. Wainwright folded his arms. "See? Predictable." At 50 feet, Rowan shifted the collective. The aircraft banked left, then right. Routine, professional, exactly as briefed. A few officers started looking at their watches. Then came the silence. Engines roared higher. The pitch deepened. Rowan's eyes locked on the altimeter, climbing past regulation height. Noah's hand hovered over the comm switch. "Rowan." She eased the stick forward. The Apache surged skyward, nose rising to a near-vertical climb. The laughter stopped. Wainwright's cup froze mid-air. "Control, this is EVRG 1, Noah said through gritted teeth. "Requesting clearance to—" Rowan's voice cut in calm. "Demonstrating high-angle recovery." "Denied," Wainwright barked into his radio. "Major Hale, you will—" His order drowned beneath turbine thunder. The Apache reached 11,800 feet, hovering against gravity itself. Every mechanic in the hangar stared upward, breath held. Then, impossibly, it rolled. The world flipped. The black machine arced through the air in a perfect inverted loop, a maneuver no manual allowed. No simulator dared replicate. One of the Pentagon officials whispered, "That's not possible." Another began recording with his phone. Inside the cockpit, Rowan's breathing stayed slow. Instruments screamed at her, red lights flashing, G-forces biting through her suit. Noah's fingers gripped the edge of his panel, eyes wide as the horizon rotated twice and settled back level. Rowan eased the stick, bringing the helicopter out of the dive into a smooth hover. Rotor wash scattered loose papers across the tarmac below. "Recovery complete," she said, voice steady. For a full 5 seconds, nobody spoke. The only sound was the fading whine of the engines cooling back to idle. When she landed, The wheels kissed concrete like a whisper. Dust drifted, glowing gold in the morning light. Wainwright marched toward her, fury under a forced smile. What part of basic maneuvers only was unclear, Colonel? Rowan removed her helmet. The early sun caught the edge of her eyes, calm, unreadable. Demonstration complete, sir. Aircraft intact. Not of servants of make and place. Behind him, one of the visiting generals leaned close to another. That recovery pattern, what did she call it? EVRG? The other shrugged, still watching Rowan step down from the cockpit. Whatever it is, it's beyond anything our pilots have logged. Wainwright's jaw tightened. Around him, the same men who laughed minutes earlier now stood silent, watching her walk away. The sound of her boots on concrete was the only thing left in the hangar. Nyla Brooks whispered to herself, barely audible over the wind. That wasn't training. Out on the runway, the sun finally broke free of the horizon. Its light poured through the hangar doors, catching on the Apache's blades as they slowed to a stop. In the reflection of the cockpit glass, Rowan's face appeared for just a moment, calm, focused, already thinking beyond the demonstration. Something bigger had just begun, though no one knew it yet. And behind her, Colonel Wainwright's voice cracked the silence. "Ground that pilot," he ordered. But even as he spoke, the generals were already looking at each other. Intrigued, the woman they mocked had just rewritten what was possible at 11,800 feet. The air inside the hangar hadn't moved since she landed. Colonel Wainwright stood rigid, jaw clenched, trying to hide the tremor in his voice. "You risked a $30 million aircraft for a stunt." Lieutenant Colonel Rowan Hale met his glare. "It wasn't a stunt. It was recovery." The silence that followed stretched long enough for the Pentagon observers to trade glances. General Riker, the senior among them, finally spoke. "That maneuver, EVRG protocol, correct?" Rowan paused. "Yes, sir." Riker's tone sharpened. "Interesting, considering EVRG isn't supposed to exist outside internal testing." Wainwright's head snapped toward him. "Excuse me, General." But the older man ignored him, studying Rowan with renewed focus. "Where did you learn that pattern, Colonel?" Rowan removed her gloves, calm. "Some lessons you don't learn in classrooms, sir." The general smiled faintly. "Black Ridge?" The words hung like a thunderclap. Crew members glanced at one another. Wainwright froze, recognition flashing across his face. "Classified operation," Rowan replied evenly. "Was," the general corrected. "It's declassified for internal review now. You flew that mission, didn't you?" The pilot they listed as missing. A low murmur rolled through the hangar. Nyla Brooks, standing near the doorway, caught her breath. She'd read that headline during training. "Test pilot lost over Black Ridge during prototype rescue." Rowan didn't answer, but her stillness was answer enough. Wainwright's face drained of color. He remembered that report. He remembered the name. General Riker handed his aide a tablet. "Pull her personnel file." The screen glowed with redacted lines, whole paragraphs blacked out, entire missions buried under secrecy stamps. Why was this concealed from command? Wainwright demanded. Riker's gaze was ice. "Because this base was under evaluation, Colonel. EVRG's mandate isn't just technology. It's culture." No one moved. The hangar that had mocked her an hour earlier now felt like a tribunal. Riker turned to Rowan. "You were part of the prototype division at Black Ridge. You flew an Apache with full system failure through a mountain pass, saved 6 men, and disappeared from radar for 22 minutes. Am I correct?" Rowan answered softly. 7 men, sir. 1 didn't make it." Her voice stayed steady, but something behind her eyes flickered grief held on a short leash. Nyla whispered to a mechanic beside her. "They said no one could have survived that wind shear." The man swallowed. "She did." Riker closed the file. "EVRG was built from your flight data, Colonel Hale. Every algorithm, every new recovery protocol, you wrote the language, whether you knew it or not." Wainwright stepped closer, defiant, but shaken. "If she was that critical, why assign her under my command without notice?" "Because we needed to see how leadership reacted to talent that didn't fit your template," Riker replied. "You just gave us the answer." The colonel opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the radio on his hip crackled violently. Static. Then a voice through heavy distortion. "Mayday. Mayday Recon Team Alpha 12 Chugach sector engines down, severe weather, request extraction." Everyone froze. The map screen on the wall blinked red. A marker pulsed deep inside Alaska's Chugach Mountains, remote, frozen, and unreachable by conventional flight. The operator's voice cut in. "Sir, satellite link confirms blizzard-level winds, negative visibility. 7 personnel stranded. Altitude 11,000. Oxygen reserves, 4 hours." Rowan glanced at Riker, then at the storm data scrolling across the monitor. That altitude, that temperature. It mirrored Black Ridge almost perfectly. "Who's the extraction lead?" she asked. Wainwright hesitated. "No one. Conditions exceed safe threshold. Command is evaluating alternatives." Rowan stepped forward. "There aren't any." Her tone wasn't defiant, it was final. General Riker's gaze never left her. "You still remember the algorithms?" "Every one of them." "Then EVRG goes live now." He turned to Wainwright. "Authorize her flight." Wainwright blinked. "Sir, with respect." "Authorize it," Riker repeated. The colonel swallowed hard, then nodded once. "Hale, you have temporary tactical command under EVRG protocols." Rowan moved toward the hangar exit without a word. Noah Mercer fell into step beside her. "You're going back into a storm like Black Ridge?" she replied quietly. "This time, I know what waits inside." Outside, the sun was fading behind low gray clouds. Mechanics sprinted to prep the Apache, removing weapon pods and swapping in fuel cells and survival modules. Nyla approached, holding a tablet with live weather feeds. "Ma'am, gusts at 90 knots, -45 wind chill, visibility less than 100 feet. Then we fly by terrain, not sight," Rowan said. Inside the command room, alarms continued to pulse red. General Riker spoke into his secure line. "Operation Night Falcon is active. There's no that at distance." Across the base, crews paused. The name alone carried weight, a code name reserved for missions no one expected to succeed. As Rowan climbed into the cockpit again, the wind outside shifted, sharp and cold, carrying the metallic tang of rain turning to snow. Noah strapped in beside her, glancing once at the clouds rolling over the horizon. "Last time you went into a storm like this," he said, "you didn't come back." Rowan closed her visor, voice calm through the comm. "Then let's change the ending." The turbines screamed to life, drowning the chatter around them. Red warning lights reflected across the wet tarmac. From the tower, Wainwright watched as the Apache lifted off its shadow, slicing across the hangar floor, vanishing into the thickening gray. Somewhere high above the base, the first streaks of snow began to fall. Fort Novacel disappeared behind them. Operation Night Falcon had begun. Snow battered the canopy before they even cleared the ridgeline. The Apache climbed into an iron sky, its engines howling against a wall of wind. Below, the Alaskan wilderness stretched endless and white, broken only by jagged shadows of ice. Captain Noah Mercer checked his gauges. Wind shears off the charts. Visibility 0.8 miles. "Adjust pitch 2 degrees left," Lieutenant Colonel Rowan Hale replied. "Keep the sensors hot. We'll ride terrain mapping." The instrument lights flickered as static crawled across the console. Back at Fort Novacel, radar screens glowed red and gold. EVRG-1 entering the Chugach storm band. An operator called out. Colonel Wainwright leaned over the display, arms locked tight. "Maintain comms with that bird. Every second counts." But the storm had its own rules. Ionospheric interference ate the signal piece by piece until only static filled the room. Somewhere inside that silence, the Apache kept moving. Rowan's eyes never left the readout. "Terrain ahead. Range 800 meters. Ridgeline rising fast." Noah gritted his teeth, tracing the contour lines on the 3D display. "We'll have maybe 5 seconds to clear the crest. Then don't blink." The helicopter surged upward, the G-forces pressing them into their seats. For a heartbeat, the nose broke through cloud into eerie stillness, then dropped again as the wind hit from below. The Apache rolled hard, skimming past the ridge with only meters to spare. Lightning flashed somewhere inside the blizzard. Snow turned to shards of ice. Rotor vibration climbed toward redline. Noah shouted over the roar. "We can't keep this up! We'll tear the stabilizers!" Rowan's hands were steady. "We keep flying until they're found." She reached down, flipping a hidden switch under the primary console. "Experimental mapping engaged," she said. "EVRG prototype in manual mode." A thin grid projected onto the canopy, painting ghost outlines of cliffs through the storm. The technology was half finished, half believed. It worked now only because she trusted it completely. "Show me the valley floor," Rowan said. The screen pulsed once, then formed a hollow trench 20 miles north. "Recon team's beacon last pinged there," Noah confirmed. "Course locked." Rowan throttled forward. Outside, the world vanished into gray like flying through smoke that never ended. Inside the command room, tensions spiked. Wainwright stood motionless as data feeds blinked out one by one. "Telemetry lost," the technician said. "Satellite link down. We can't track them. Thank you for watching their place still." Major Elias Porter, Kane by his side, exhaled slowly. "She's reading the air now. Forget your screens." Wainwright turned, his face pale. "You flew with her before?" Porter nodded. "At Black Ridge. When systems failed, she listened to the machine, to the wind. That's how she lived. Miles above frozen valleys, Rowan did exactly that. The hum of the rotors told her where the gusts shifted. Every vibration under her feet spoke a language of turbulence and pressure. Noah's voice cracked. "I'm losing nav completely. Magnetic deviation's gone haywire." "Then trust me," Rowan said. "Follow the weight of the air." He stared at her for a second, then adjusted his controls in sync. The Apache dipped between cliffs, so narrow the wingtips scraped frost from rock. Snow sprayed off the blades in white fire. Alarms screamed, but Rowan tuned them out, hearing only the rhythm of flight. At the base, another minute passed without signal. An operator whispered, "Should we prepare recovery teams?" Wainwright didn't answer. His knuckles turned white against the console. Rowan pushed the throttle again. The storm fought back, slamming the craft sideways. A warning light flared. Ice buildup then blinked out as heaters fought to clear the rotors. Noah's voice cut through static. "Altitude dropping. We're getting pulled into the downdraft. Compensate vertical trim. Already maxed." Then manual override. She killed the autopilot, grip tightening on the cyclic. The helicopter jerked as control returned fully to her hands. She leaned into the stick, feeling the drag, the bite, the pull of gravity. "Hold on," she said. "We're going blind." The world outside dissolved into white. Only the sound of the rotor, steady, relentless, guided her forward. 3 miles south of the last beacon, the thermal scanner blinked faint orange. Noah looked up, disbelief flooding his face. "Wait, contact. 7 signatures, weak, but alive." Rowan exhaled through her nose. "Then we're close." She adjusted descent, keeping power tight. "Deploy terrain scan. Look for a crevasse or ledge." "There," Noah pointed. "A split in the ridge, 40 degrees north. Depth, maybe 70 feet. That's our hole, back at Fort Novacel." The main screen flickered once, showing a blurred signal EVRG-1 reappearing on tracking. "She's inside the canyon," the operator gasped. Wainwright's voice was barely audible. "If she makes it out, it rewrites the book." Inside the storm, Rowan dropped the Apache nose first into the trench. The rotor wash scattered snow like sparks from a forge. Ice walls closed around them as the helicopter vanished into the mountain's throat. Noah checked his altimeter 200 feet, then 150. "Landing zone's unstable," he warned. "Doesn't matter," Rowan said. "We're not landing. We're rescuing." The blizzard swallowed their voices, their signal, their light. Only the steady heartbeat of the engines remained, pulsing through the dark. And as the storm closed in, Rowan Hale drove the Apache deeper into the white abyss, where no one had ever returned alive. The trench narrowed until it felt like flying inside a throat of ice. The rotors scraped air too tight for comfort, their echo bouncing back like thunder. Every inch forward was a fight between lift and collapse. Captain Noah Mercer stared at the thermal map glowing faint orange across the screen. 7 heat signatures confirmed, coordinates locked. Lieutenant Colonel Rowan Hale's knuckles whitened on the stick. "Then we get them out. Have now in the pollen main in another." The Apache descended through flurries of snow so thick it blurred depth perception. A gust slammed against the fuselage, tilting them 30 degrees. Warning lights blinked red, but Rowan's breathing stayed calm, metronomic. Below, faint figures moved near the base of a frozen ledge, men clinging to survival tents half buried under frost. Noah squinted. "Their beacon's dying. Oxygen too." Then we cut time in half. She switched the weapon control interface to manual, stripping out combat systems to lighten load. "Converting mounts to support harness," she said, pulling open the override panel. Noah's eyebrows shot up. "You're serious?" "Completely. Metal bolts groaned as the external hardpoints released. She rerouted hydraulics to form makeshift suspension points. It wasn't in any manual, but that never stopped her before. "Winch ready," Noah called. "Stability marginal, nor to the pans of the Tanger." "Marginal works," Rowan replied. "Keep her steady." She lowered the Apache until its skids hovered less than 2 feet above the ridge. The rotor wash carved spirals into the snow, whipping visibility to nothing. One by one, the stranded soldiers stepped into the harness rigging Noah had deployed. "First man up," he shouted. The cable jerked, straining under weight. Rowan feathered the collective, compensating wind shear as ice shattered against the fuselage. "Second man." "Got him." "Third's losing footing, adjust pitch." Rowan eased power, then tapped the left pedal just enough to counter drift. The helicopter groaned but held. Inside her visor, sweat beaded at her temples, freezing almost instantly. "Fourth secure!" Noah's voice cracked through the comm. The mountain howled back, a sound so deep it vibrated the cockpit. A massive slab of snow shifted overhead. "Rowan avalanche forming." She didn't look up. "We're not done." "Fives in harness! Move!" The avalanche broke like a wave, hammering the crevasse with thunderous force. Ice fragments the size of boulders crashed down the slope, slamming into the ridge. The Apache shook violently. Alarms screamed across every display. Noah gripped the console. "We've lost tail rotor feedback!" Switch to torque balance. Manual control. "That's suicide!" "Exactly." Rowan yanked the cyclic back, pulling the Apache nose up to redirect rotor wash. The maneuver pushed them inches away from the falling snow wall, close enough for the cockpit glass to crack under pressure. She exhaled through gritted teeth. 6 up, 1 left. The final survivor was half buried, arm waving weakly under frozen debris. Noah's voice broke. "He's pinned. Then we dig." "Hey, all the grand's contents." Rowan dropped altitude until the skids touched ice, the machine trembling under her control. She released the side latch, cold wind flooding the cockpit. With one hand, she reached down with the emergency hoist, guiding it blind through snow dust. "Hook engaged," Noah shouted. Rowan adjusted power just enough to lift without losing traction. The man tore free as the avalanche's edge crashed past them, shaking the whole crevasse like an earthquake. "Everyone's aboard!" Noah yelled. Rowan slammed the throttle, the Apache roaring upward, blades biting through the storm. Chunks of snow scraped along the belly as they burst from the trench into open sky. Below them, the avalanche devoured everything they'd just left. Above, only wind and static waited. "Confirm all 7, Rowan demanded. "7 alive," Noah said, voice rough. "Unbelievable. And well, at Fort Novacel, the tracking screen flickered alive," an operator gasped. "EVRG-1 transmitting again, weak signal." Colonel Wainwright leaned forward. "Say it." "She got them. 7 survivors." In the cockpit, the celebration was short. Fuel warnings glowed yellow. Systems overloaded from temperature stress. The blades shuddered under ice buildup, threatening imbalance. Noah adjusted the power curve. "If we push now, we might not make it back." Rowan didn't hesitate. "We don't might. We will." Her eyes narrowed. "Calculate shortest vector home. Strip non-essential systems." Noah nodded, fingers flying across the panel. "Course set. 2 hours to Fort Novacel. If the storm doesn't close." Rowan steadied her grip. "It will. So we stay ahead of it." Lightning flared somewhere behind them. The sound rolled like artillery through the valley. The Apache tilted forward, slicing into the gale head-on. At the command center, Wainwright whispered to himself, "She's really doing it." Major Porter didn't look away from the radar. She always was. High above the mountains, the black helicopter disappeared into the storm again, its rotors carving light from darkness, carrying 7 lives and a legend reborn. For the next 5 hours and 40 minutes, no one heard a single transmission. The last signal logged at Fort Novacel read only 2 words, fractured through static. "Returning. Home." The horizon bled from black to silver as dawn reached the airfield. Wind swept across Fort Novacel, biting cold and still carrying the echo of night. Every search crew on standby turned toward the north, waiting for a miracle through static. 5 hours and 40 minutes since contact. No radar, no beacon, only silence. Then, through the fog, a low thrum began to rise. At first it sounded like thunder, then it grew steadier, mechanical. Unmistakable, the heartbeat of rotors cutting through air. The radio crackled once, ghostly and broken. EVRG 1. Inbound. The hangar erupted. Technicians sprinted to the tarmac, emergency crews in tow. Floodlights snapped on, beams slicing through the mist like searchlights over an ocean. Out of that pale gray came a silhouette, scarred, half frozen, crawling through the air like a wounded bird refusing to fall. The Apache's nose was cracked, paint stripped by ice. One rotor blade rimed white, yet it held steady, descending inch by inch until the skids touched down hard on concrete. The impact jolted the fuselage, but it stayed upright. Engines whined down with a long, trembling sigh. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the cockpit canopy opened. Snow dust spilled out first, then Lieutenant Colonel Rowan Hale stepped into daylight. Her visor reflected the floodlights, her voice calm through the headset. 7 survivors. Medics now. Stretchers rolled forward. The rescued soldiers, frostbitten but breathing, were lifted from the side compartments Noah had converted into emergency pods. One man grabbed her wrist weakly. Didn't think anyone would come. Rowan squeezed his hand once. Someone always does. Captain Noah Mercer climbed out next, limping slightly. Grin exhausted but proud. She held through everything, he said, patting the helicopter's scarred side. Didn't even flinch. A mechanic nearby whispered. Neither did she. From the tower, Colonel Wainwright descended the steps slowly, eyes fixed on Rowan. Every officer on the line stepped aside as he approached. He stopped in front of her, removing his gloves, expression unreadable. You disobeyed orders, he said quietly. Rowan nodded. Yes, sir. He took a breath. You risked the only EVRG prototype we have. Another nod. Yes, sir. The colonel's gaze drifted to the 7 stretchers lined up under blankets. All breathing, all alive. He looked back at her, voice lower now. And you brought them home. He straightened, then saluted, sharp, deliberate. Every crew member on the line followed. The airfield fell silent except for the flutter of flags in the morning wind. General Riker appeared behind him, flanked by aides and cameras that had arrived too late to witness the rescue. His words carried across the hangar. Effective immediately, EVRG transitions from test phase to national deployment. Colonel Hale, you're in command. Rowan didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on the helicopter, steam rising from the engines, frost melting along the frame. It looked alive, breathing with her. Finally, she spoke. Then we start with the ones who've been told they can't. General Riker smiled faintly. That's the point. In the following hours, crews worked under floodlights, documenting every scar on the airframe. Technicians sketched the modified harness system, labeling it Hale Adaptation. Engineers murmured about airflow signatures and torque compensation that defied their calculations. Inside the ready room, Lieutenant Nyla Brooks stared at the mission footage fragments from Noah's onboard recorder that somehow survived. The moment the helicopter rolled vertical, the tremor of ice breaking around the crevasse, her eyes filled with something between awe and disbelief. She turned as Rowan entered quietly. Permission to join EVRG, ma'am. Oh no slat than some for in tum. Rowan smiled for the first time that day. Permission granted. On the far side of the base, Major Porter watched the sunrise over the hangar. He leaned on his cane, murmuring, Black Ridge is finally closed. Wainwright stood beside him, exhaling through cold air. No, he said softly. It just opened a new chapter. By noon, the prototype was rolled into Maintenance Bay 12. Crews cleaned away the ice, patched bullet-sized dents from falling debris, and painted over the scars with dark graphite gray. Before the next flight, someone stenciled 3 words under the cockpit window. The standard lives. That evening, the base quieted again. No ceremony, no crowd. Just the distant hum of generators and the click of cooling metal. Rowan stood alone near the runway. Jacket collar pulled high against the wind. A new patch rested in her hand, the freshly minted EVRG insignia, a silver falcon framed in black. She turned it once between her fingers, its edges catching the orange of the setting sun. Behind her, Wainwright approached one last time. You rewrote the manual today. Rowan's eyes stayed on the horizon. Manuals don't save lives. Pilots do. He nodded, the faintest smile forming. Then God help whoever tries to follow you. She clipped the patch onto her flight suit, and walked toward the hangar. The radio on her belt crackled softly. EVRG command, this is Night Falcon. 2 requesting clearance for training sortie. Rowan keyed the mic, her voice calm, steady. Night Falcon 2, cleared for takeoff. In the distance, an Apache engine came alive again, its blades turning slow and deliberate. As the rotors gained speed, the sound rolled through the empty airfield like a heartbeat restarting after silence. Rowan watched the helicopter lift into the fading sky, its shadow crossing her boots before vanishing into cloud. The light dimmed, the wind quieted, and for the first time in years, she let herself breathe. EVRG had a name, a mission, and a beginning. And above Fort Novacel, one steady echo carried through the dusk. The promise of what comes next. If you enjoyed the story, consider sending a super chat to help bring more stories like this. Now, click on the video on the screen to hear another story that's just as powerful and captivating, with courage, sacrifice, and a choice that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about duty and justice.